We live in a time where anyone can learn almost anything online. But here's the catch. Just because information is available doesn't mean we actually learn it. In fact, most of us are learning in ways that don't stick. Today, I want to break down how learning really works in the digital age and the 3 biggest myths that might be holding you back. Welcome back to Digital Perivalon. In our last video, we explored why knowledge is the ultimate advantage in the digital world. But today, I want to ask you something. With so much access to information, why do most of us struggle to actually learn effectively? The truth is, learning in the digital age isn't about how much you consume. It's about how much you can retain, connect, and apply to your everyday life. Let's step back in time. In the past, learning was scarce. You had to attend lectures, travel to libraries to read books, or find mentors in person that you can talk to gain some past experience. The barrier to entry was high. Today, a 14-year-old with an internet connection has access to more information than a world-class professor had 50 years ago. But here's the problem. More access doesn't equal more learning. In fact, studies show we're actually less likely to retain information when we multitask, we skim, or we binge content on our phones. We confuse exposure with understanding. And that's one of the biggest mistakes of the digital age. We think because we've read an article, watched a video, or listened to a podcast that we've learnt it. But the brain doesn't work like that. So the first myth is that you can learn just by listening or watching. It feels productive listening to podcasts, watching tutorials, even rereading the same notes. But research from Make It Stick has shown that the kind of passive consumption often creates only the illusion of mastery. You feel like you know the material until you're asked to recall it or apply it, and suddenly you can't remember it, it slips away. Real learning is active. That means getting your brain to work with the material. Take notes in your own words, quiz yourself, create mind maps, or even try teaching the concept to a friend. When you put effort into retrieving and using knowledge, you strengthen those neural pathways, like exercising a muscle in a gym. Richard Feynman had a brilliant way of testing this. He used to say, explain the concept as if you're teaching it to a beginner. If you can't break it down simply, then you don't really fully understand it yet. That's active learning in action. Think about it. When you're in school, the times you really learned something weren't just when you listened to the teacher talking, they were when you solved the problems yourself, explained your thinking out loud, or practiced until it's stuck in your brain. The same principle applies today. So next time you're scrolling, watching, or listening, ask yourself, how am I engaging with this knowledge? Am I just consuming it, or am I actually making it my own? The second myth is that the more you consume, the more you know. In today's digital environment, it feels like knowledge is everywhere. YouTube videos, podcasts, blogs, online courses. We live in an endless stream of information. And the temptation is to think, the more I consume, the smarter I'll get. But the brain doesn't work like that. Research shows that our minds need space, repetition, and reflection for information to actually move into our long-term memories. Without that, most of what we take in fades away within hours or days. Think about the last time you binged a YouTube playlist or a podcast series. At the time, it felt exciting. You're absorbing a ton of information. But a week later, how much of it can you really recall? Word for word, or actually apply the knowledge that you might have learned? Probably very little. That's because our brains are designed to filter. If we don't process something deeply by pausing, reviewing, or connecting it to what we already know, it simply gets discarded, thrown away as noise. Here's the key. Knowledge compounds when it's captured and revisited. That's why having a personal knowledge capture system, whether it's a digital note-taking app, a physical journal, or a structured database, is very powerful. It transforms fleeting information into lasting wisdom. And here's the good news. You don't have to remember everything. In fact, trying to keep it all in your head is a recipe for burnout. What matters is creating a system where you can offload the information, revisit it at the right time, and build connections. That's when information turns into insight. I'll show you exactly how to build a practical knowledge capture system in upcoming videos. But for now, the takeaway is this. Don't measure your learning by how much you've consumed. Measure it by how much you've retained, reflected on, and can actually use. The third myth is that learning is something formal, that it ends when school or university is finished. For many of us, education is framed as a chapter in life. You go to school, you study, you graduate, and then you move on. But the truth is, learning never really ends. We are lifelong learners. The real question is whether we're learning intentionally or just drifting along, picking things up by accident. The people who thrive in the digital age are those who deliberately seek out knowledge, capture it and build on it. They don't just rely on formal courses or certifications, they create their own ongoing curriculum through reading books, talking to mentors, looking at online resources and online courses, and looking at the real-world experience. As Jos Watzkin explains in The Art of Learning, mastery isn't about talent. It's about process. It's about iteration. It's about cultivating a mindset of growth, where every challenge becomes a chance to refine your skills. Talent might open the door, but process is what keeps you moving forward. And the opportunities for learning today are everywhere. Every conversation you have, every mistake you make, every project you attempt, that's all a classroom. It's all knowledge. YouTube tutorials, podcasts, communities, and even failures are teachers. If the most successful people in any field share one thing in common, they don't wait for structured lessons. They take ownership of their learning journey. They look at their digital environment not just as entertainment, but as an endless library of ideas waiting to be explored. So instead of asking, where can I go to learn? Ask yourself, how can I turn what's already in front of me into a lesson? Because once you start to see the world that way, you'll realize that learning doesn't end with graduation. It compounds for the rest of your life. So here's the reality. In the digital age, we don't have a knowledge problem. We have a learning problem. To really learn, we need to engage actively, filter wisely, and embrace lifelong learning. In our next video, I'll share something personal, my own knowledge capture system in Notion. This is how I make sure the ideas I encounter don't just disappear, but actually compound over time. If you found this video valuable, subscribe and join me on this journey, because the way you learn is the way you grow. And here's my question for you. What's the last thing you learned that truly stuck with you? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to know. Thanks for watching.